Thank you everyone for joining me again. I'm going to have to start out by apologizing for Microsoft. No, I guess it's... I was trying to be gung-ho and trying to have everything installed on Server 2016. Even though the documentation of MIM says it supports Server 2016, SharePoint 2016, SQL 2016. I don't believe that SharePoint 2016 supports SQL 2016 and MIM 2016 and Server 2016, and Server 2016 supports. I don't believe that. Basically what I'm saying is I don't believe they're up to par just yet. I've gotten 3 videos in and got stuck big time. There was a portion of installing the MIM portal where it was deploying its solution pack to SharePoint. And the solution pack would fail because dependencies weren't found. And as a fresh install, I attempted to build another box, separating AD from SharePoint. That didn't work either. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to create another server that is just FIM. I'm going to leave the sandbox Active Directory as it is, but I'm going to just stand up a FIM server. Kind of dual fold here, kind of help the domain controller and SharePoint have their own resources. But at the very least, you'll still be able to see Identity Manager interact with a 2016 environment. So that's what I'm going to do. I am going to montage a 2012 R2 install real fast, and then we'll get on to installing the prerequisites. I was about ready to do this via PowerShell and just hit enter, but I figured I better stop and let you know, hey, we need to do this. This is a tutorial video after all. So we are doing the install-Windows feature as before, and we're including the web-web server, net-framework-features, RSAT-AD PowerShell, the remote server administrator tools, web-mgmt-tools, application server, Windows Identity Foundation, Server Media Foundation, and XPS Viewer. We're also doing a -include all sub feature. We're telling it can restart as soon as it's finished. And I'm saying use a source of D sources SXS. That's for the .NET 3.5 features. So we'll just hit enter on that, and it's going to go ahead and install all those for us and reboot when it's finished. While that's rebooting, let's jump over to our AD machine. In Active Directory, I've gone ahead and created a few service accounts. _MIM MA, MIM Service, MIM Sync, _SharePoint, _SQL Server. And I've also created a few groups: MIM Sync admins, browse, joiners, operators, and password reset. I have added MIM Service and Administrator to the MIM Sync admins group. We're going to be using these accounts for our different setups here. The next thing we need to do is set some SPNs. And without going into what are SPNs, it basically sets service principal names for accounts to allow Kerberos authentication. So we need to do that for the synchronization service, the MIM Synchronization Service, the MIM Service, and SharePoint. Each of these are going to have their own accounts. These MIM Synchronization Service, which its SPN is FIM Synchronization Service. The account that's going to be running that is _MIM Sync. The MIM service is FIM Service. _SharePoint is obviously going to be HTTP. So the command for that is set SPN -s, the service principal name, then the account name. So all I'm going to do is copy and paste that into a command prompt. And they're set. The final thing we need to do is edit the default domain policy. Under Policies, Windows Settings, Security Settings, Local Policies, and User Rights Assignments, we'll need to give all of our service accounts logon as a service right. Underneath Deny Access from this computer, we need to add the MIM Sync and MIM Service accounts. And underneath the Deny Logon Locally, we need to add the same, the MIM Sync and MIM Service. Now back on our MIM machine, we need to change the IIS authentication mode. We need to set that to Windows authentication. So to do that, I'm just going to really quick in PowerShell do stop the IIS service. And underneath System32 folder, there's an inetserv folder. And in there, there's an appcommand.exe, appcmd.exe. That requires an argument of unlock, followed by a config argument, and then a switch of /section, :Windows authentication, and then a -commit, :app host. Then we'll get an unlock section, and now we can start IIS back up. Now on to SQL. We're going to do the latest stable version, and that's SQL Server 2014. So we'll just jump through the install. New SQL Server standalone installation. We're going to do an evaluation version of this, accept the license and terms. We won't use Microsoft Update to check for updates, so we get an error. So the install rules came back with one warning, the .NET application security. That came back because I am not joined to the internet. So it's saying there might be some issues with that, but that's okay. We're going to do the SQL Server feature installation. And in the features, we're going to do the database engine and the full text and semantic extractions for search. We're also going to scroll down and select the management tools. We're going to leave all the default install locations. We're going to use the default instance of MS SQL Server. I am going to set the I am going to set the SQL Server agent to network service and go ahead and set it to automatic startup because we're going to be using that. We're going to use our underscore SQL server as our database engine user account. We will use Windows authentication, but we are going to add our built-in administrators group. And then we'll hit install. And we can just close out of the setup once it's completed, and the installation center as well. Now what I'll go ahead and do is I'm going to open up the SQL Server Management Studio, and we'll go ahead and connect to the local machine. We want to change the maximum amount of RAM that SQL can use. Otherwise, it's just going to keep on using it and never give it back to the OS. So we'll just right-click on the actual server and go to Properties, and then Memory. And then here's where we can specify the maximum amount of memory. I'm just going to give it 2 gigs. The server has 4, it has 2. And say OK. And if it is over the maximum amount you set, you don't have to restart the services. It'll actually start giving it back to the operating system. You can open up Task Manager and actually see that happening. I've downloaded SharePoint 2013 with Service Pack 1 Foundation, actually. And I have this script. I'll include in the description, but it includes the SharePoint Server Features install as well as offline installer for the prerequisites and the URLs of where to download the prerequisites. So you just download the prerequisites, plop them into prerequisites installer files, and you can execute the offline installer. Of course, if you're on the net and the internet, you won't have to worry about that. But mine is offline. And I'm just removing these spaces in here. So I'm going to edit the offline installer, make sure my path is correct. There were a few issues with this script. I had to move the arguments list up to the start process line and remove some spaces inside of this actual arguments list. But once I did that, I should be able to run a PowerShell session, paste that in there. Then I should be able to hit next and accept the terms of the agreement and next. And now it'll go ahead and configure and install the prerequisites required. At the end of the preparation tool, it'll say your system needs to be restarted. Just hit finish and it'll restart for you. When you log back in, the preparation tool will launch again. And it'll appear as if it's starting all over, but it's actually not. So just hit next, accept the agreement, and next again. And it'll finish with its configuration. And make sure you actually read the small text. I get myself stopped up all the time at this area that I think it's completed, but I didn't really read it completely. And then I continue on and something's not working. So now we can actually jump over to the actual setup.exe for the SharePoint. We'll accept the agreement and just say continue. And since I've already installed SQL Server, I'm going to do a complete install and say install now. Once the setup's complete, we'll go ahead and let it run the configuration wizard, and we'll next, and it just gives us a little warning that says, hey, these services will restart, and we'll say yes. We're going to create a new server farm. The database server is going to be sp-mim, and the username is going to be sandbox_SharePoint. And I'm just going to make a passphrase here. See if it'll let me ABC123. And it does not, so it has to be complex. And I am going to specify a port number just so I can get to this easily without having to actually use this shortcut, because I won't be able to remember whatever it randomized it to. And I'll say next. And then I'll look over the config and say yep, and say next. Once the configuration is complete, we'll just say finish, and it's going to open up our central administration webpage. Once the central admin page comes up, we want to go through the configuration wizard. Choose whether or not you want to participate in the improvement program. And then we'll just say start the wizard. Make sure you choose the use existing managed account, which is the SharePoint account we entered a second ago. We'll leave these configurations checked and say next. Once the wizard's complete, we're actually going to skip the creation of a site collection. And then we'll just say finish. Once the wizard completes, I'm going to go into application management and manage web applications, and I'm going to delete the SharePoint 80. I want to use port 80, and the web application that's created is not using the correct authentication method. So I'm just going to say delete, and I'm going to say delete the IIS website and the content database. It may take some time, but that window will finally go away, and you'll notice that it's spinning and doing something at the top. So that web application is gone. So I'm actually going to browse my start menu here. And find the SharePoint 2013 management shell, and I'm going to run that as administrator. Now, what I'm going to do first is create a web application that's using the Kerberos authentication method. But before I do that, I need to get a managed account. And specifically that _SharePoint managed account. We're going to tell the application pool to use this managed account. So the command for that is get sp managed account. And I'm just going to set it to a variable. And I'm going to say identity sandbox_SharePoint. Now we can go ahead and create our web application, which the command for that is new sp web application. I'm going to name it MIM Portal. The application pool, I'm going to name MIM App Pool. The application pool account is that managed account variable we just created. And then the authentication method is Kerberos. I'm going to say port 80, and the URL is going to be sp-mim.sandbox.local, and I'm going to hit enter on that. And we'll get a little warning saying, hey, this is Windows Classic Authentication method. The only way you can create a web application using Kerberos authentication is via PowerShell. They've depreciated it in the central admin. Once that completes, we can actually go ahead and create the site collection. But before we do that, we need to check on our compatibility mode. So I'm going to get SP web application and that application we just created. And I'm going to say web.compatibility range. So the minimum is 14, which is good. Now we'll go ahead and set a template variable here. Get SP web template. Compatibility level is going to be 14, and the identity is going to be STS_1. Now we can say new SP site. The URL is going to be the web.url. The template is going to be that variable we just set. The owner alias is going to be sandbox administrator. Compatibility level is going to be 14, and I'm going to name it MIM Portal. And we'll go ahead and say enter. Now we just have to set a couple of settings on here. We're going to get the SP site here using the web.url and site.allow self-service upgrade is going to be $false, and then we'll just check the compatibility level on this, which is 14. Good. Now the final thing is changing the view state on the server. So we need to do content service is equal to, and inside of brackets we're going to do Microsoft.SharePoint.administration.SP web service. And we'll end that bracket, and then 2 colons, and then the content service. That grabs the actual content service. So we're going to say content service dot view state on server is equal to false, and then content service dot update. Now the final thing here in PowerShell for a little bit, we're going to get the SP timer job. And the name of the job is hourly-all-SP timer service-health-analysis-job. And we're going to pipe that result to disable SP timer job. Okay, so we'll go ahead and minimize that. We may come back. I'm just going to refresh these web applications to make sure the MIM portal's there. And it is. So now I'm going to go back to application management and configure alternate access mappings. And I'm going to go over here to alternate access mapping collection. I'm going to click on that show all and change the collection. And I'm going to choose the MIM portal. And then I'm going to add an internal URL. And I'm just going to say http sb-mim so we can get to it using the short name rather than the fully qualified. And so now we should be able to go to sb-mim, and we should get the authentication here. So it should be administrator and our password. And there's our blank site collection. The last thing we want to do, so we're not prompted constantly for that username and password, is add this site to the local intranet And we'll just go to Internet Properties, Security, and add that site underneath Advanced and say Close. All right. Now we just want to make sure, I'm going to make sure I'm just going to run a quick PowerShell command to make sure the SharePoint Administration Service is running. And it is. So I'm going to leave this video here, and in the next video we can start installing the MIM components, connecting the management agents, and start our synchronizations. Thank you very much for watching the video. It means a great deal to me. If you liked it, you can hit the little bitty thumbs up for me. You can subscribe to the channel if you like. You can also leave me some comments if you like the video, if you want to see more of something, or say, hey, I've tried it this way. But anyways, thank you very much, and I'll talk to you next time.